Hello and welcome to the bakingmad.com kitchen. I'm going to show you how to line pastry cases and bake them blind. So I've got here some shortcrust pastry that's been chilling. You don't have to chill it, but it's much better if you do, because you want it to be really light and short, and by relaxing it in the fridge, the pastry shouldn't stretch and shrink when it's baked. So just roll it out on a worktop that's lightly dusted with flour and roll your pastry thinly, and you should always roll it in one direction. Turn it and roll it in the other direction. Don't ever be tempted to go like this and like this, because then you will really stretch your pastry, and when it bakes it will shrink in all sorts of weird shapes. So just roll it, as I say, in one direction only, just turning it every now and then, and try and keep it, when you're rolling it, more or less into the shape of your pastry case. Make sure you keep turning your pastry so that it doesn't, you know then that it's not stuck to the worktop, and it wants to be a little bit bigger than your pastry case and big enough to come up over the sides as well. So then flip your shortcrust pastry over the rolling pin and place it into your baking tray. Then just lift the pastry down the sides, pushing it up against the sides. Try not to stretch the pastry. It's better to lift and push the pastry in than to sort of force it down, because if you stretch it again, when it's baked it will shrink into a weird shape. So just push it up against the sides. Don't worry if you've got any cracks, you can just always patch that up. And particularly if you're making a really short pastry with all butter and sugar and maybe egg yolks, it's not as easy to handle, and you do get the odd crack. And then just push it down up against the sides, making sure that it's tight against the base. And then what I like to do is just bend that back. Now some people will trim off the edge with a knife, or you can just leave that bent back and then we can trim that off when it's baked. To bake your pastry case blind, I just prick the base with a fork just a couple of times. This will make sure that the pastry doesn't rise up and there's no bubbles in it. Line it with a sheet of baking parchment and fill with baking beans. Now you can use baking beans, or you can just use dried beans or even rice, but this weighs down the pastry and stops it from rising. And these ceramic beans in particular are really good because they get hot and they help to make the pastry crisp as well. And the whole point of baking a pastry case blind is so that you get a nice crisp pastry shell and not a soggy bottom. So I'm going to pop that in the oven for about 15 minutes, and then I take out the paper and the baking beans and pop it back in the oven for another 5 minutes until it's golden and crisp.